Welcome back to How to Quilt the Quilt. We're going to look at this table runner today that uses fabrics by Kansas Troubles. This is one of my favorite, I guess it's a designer. I just finished a large quilt that uses a lot of fabrics by Kansas Troubles. So I enjoy quilting anything with these fabrics in them. So this table runner was provided by my friend Laura. And Laura is a wonderful quilter. Her sister made this. She likes small projects. The quilt itself is 14¼ inches by 30 inches. And if Laura's watching this, I rounded your numbers to halves and quarters, so you know. So the two middle blocks are about 7½ inches. We'll go back and look at those. The ones on each side are going to be half a block each, so they're 3¼ inches. The inner border is 1 inch approximately, and the outer border is 2½ inches. So we'll go back and look at that quilt real quick. So we've got 7½ inch blocks. I think that goes from here to here. And then this is 7½, 7½. This would be 3¼ and 3¼ inch blocks. The inner border is 1 inch and the outer border is 2½ inches. I had no idea they were this small, I must say. I was looking at wider ones. So now let's go back. And the first thing we're going to do is how can we quilt this with all over quilting? Well, this is always elegant fabric. And I love having the red on the outside, makes it elegant as well. So we can always use the little hook design to do all over quilting on this. Your challenge would be, what color would I do? Well, let me go back. You can do that hook design on just this inner portion, or you can do it all throughout the whole table runner. On the inner portion, of course, it would probably make sense to use more of a cream thread. But if you're going to do it on the whole portion, you might go a little bit darker so that you would blend in with the middle section but not overwhelm it and still show up somewhat on the outer section. So thread in that case would become very important. We could also go through and change that up and use the hook, but add the little feathers to it that we've seen. And so we would follow the same process as the hook, but instead we would just add feathers to it. And you can see how when I needed to move, I just created a little, I'm not even sure what you call that, but something to fill in space. We could also do this in all over feathers. And I'm going to share this because I know that Laura, I know she can do the feathers. She does a really beautiful job. So we could do all over feathers the same way. We could do feathers in the middle. We could do hooks on the outside, or vice versa. So you could combine these two. Again, the thread would be important. What you would want to be careful to not do is to just, if you're going to do the outside separately, to not just choose the red. I would probably go with more of the goldish that's in the inner border, and I'll show what I mean by that shortly. So we could add the feathers, and we just echo around a feather to get to a part where we do a new feather, and this would be gorgeous with the feathers all over it. We could also do something different. Okay, so I show you everything. So if you look at this, actually it does look eyes here. When you add feathers all around it, we end up with two sets of eyes. So no, I don't particularly care for that, but it was something I was playing with, and so I've got to be real and show that to you. Now let's take a look at this and do it in light of how I looked at Jill's, because there's some things going on here that we could also bring out. So I've got blue marks, just like I would have a blue marker, to extend seams that aren't there, but that would pull into other seams. So let's start in the middle. We can see these seams here, and then if you'll look, you can actually see a square that's intercepted by the main design here. So if I drew extended lines, I can see a whole square, or a square and a square, that shows up. We can see portions of that on the sides, on the actual sides, and then here we go here, and then on the ends as well. So we've got several of those. Now, by this design, and then here we see it again. So we've got several on each side and then one on each end. So we see the half square part, half of the half square triangle. See here? And then here it is out here. So we see a half square triangle, and then we can add that portion that would be part of the square that surrounds it. Then, and that's the same thing that happens down here on the end. Then we can go, if we look at this section here, we can add these two little marks, which I would do with a marking tool, a blue line marker that's water soluble. And then you can see that we have a new portion of a block and then another little portion here. If you'll look between the the major design blocks, you'll see an interesting feature here that is also intercepted by the part of these stars. And so we have a lovely feature here that we could do something with as well. And I'm hoping this shows up well on the video. And then the other side. So this portion here is one side of this. We just don't have the whole thing. And then on the other side, you have the other side. That would bring it together. So we have some things that we can do with partial squares and some sashing type of designs that would make up the squares. What can we do with what we see? That's part of the drawing. Now we can look at what we did. So we'll start in the middle. So in the center, you can see how I went around with the little feathers and tried to center to here and then to here, and then did squiggles on the outside box. That leaves us with this open area here that is actually a square. It's covered by this area and this area. We can simply use feathers in those. And I curved them. You could go straight around the corners, but I curved them because of this small area here. So we can put feathers there. And then we would duplicate that. We would be duplicating this portion in these areas here. Here's the half of the feathers and then the squiggles here. All along the sides of the quilt and at the ends as well. Oh, I didn't get rid of everything. Then we can go back and look at that end. And what we would be left with would be this area here, which is part of what we had, and then this area here, which is actually that main part. And then another set of squiggles here on each side. So what I did is I did fill them with feathers and the squiggles and then the feathers again. And you can see how, and that's just a portion of what would have been done here. And then that was on the other side as well. And I hope my hands aren't getting in the way. I wasn't paying attention to that. So here's the feathers, the squiggles, and the feathers. I really like that. If you don't like this, oh, let me talk about something else on that too. So then the borders, I didn't realize this was a 2.5-inch border. So in this case, I probably would do straight lines. Now, you could do anything. Here I showed starting in the middle and doing 3/4 of an inch apart. Skip maybe an inch and then do 2. Skip an inch and do 3. What you want to make sure, I think this would look better if you could somehow miter your last set here. But you could play around with what you like, but I would probably try to miter that set. So I might draw these out some with a marking tool on around it to help me. You could also do feathers. This would be narrow feathers. Now we said that we had 2.5 inch. We would actually end up with less than that because we would want to make sure that we did not go all the way to the border. We would want to leave at least 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch so that we don't cut off feathers. We could do them in the red, like I said, but I would probably pull out the color of what's in this 1-inch inner border, more of a goldish look, a deep gold, if I were to do them and do the feathers in that. And that's probably what I would do with the straight lines, but you could do those in red. If I were to do something on this quilt like this, similar to this, I would probably use wool. And before I started with any of the designs, I would go ahead at the very least and stitch in the ditch around all of these seams, around the star itself. Actually, I would do the seams first and then around the entire star. You can stitch in the ditch around every ditch on this quilt, but and a lot of people would tell you that. If I'm going to just enjoy this, I think you could also do some of the things that we're talking about and not stitch in the ditch around every ditch, but you might stitch like just this block and then around this inner block portion so that the major parts, not every single seam within that. Sometimes I actually don't like that, but I would use my discretion as far as what I like. But I might do that and stitch in the ditches so that between my designs would look nice. We could change those squiggles. If you didn't like those squiggles, we could also change them up a little bit. And here I've showed where here's our flower in the center. We could draw 2 lines, probably using a ruler, and I like to use my line tamer ruler, going up the center 1/4 of an inch apart. And then you could do squiggles on both sides, or squiggles on one side, which I kind of like that, or no squiggles at all, just doing the small pebbles inside of it. And I like that idea too. Here it is so that you can see it tied together on the bottom as well. So you can see it in the middle and then you can see it around the edges, and then you could still add, it makes it a slightly more modern, and then you could still add the feathers to it. So that's where we would end up with on the table runner that Laura provided. At least that's my ideas. There's so many ways you could quilt this. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Come join us Wednesday for the final design presentation for the strips of our Jelly Roll Race quilt. Then I will probably do the border of my quilt, and I'll show you as I do that, but I'm not sure who's doing borders and who's not. But I will end up showing that when I get that done. So have a super week. We'll see you Wednesday. Bye-bye now.